Thanks, Sandy. Thanks for the introduction. So let me tell you a little bit about my experience about menopause. I haven't always been a menopause coach. So I'm 46 now, and for the past decade, I've been experiencing perimenopause symptoms. So I suppose I was relatively young at 36 to start transitioning through, but you know, perimenopause can go on for up to 15 years. That is, kind of worst case scenario. I think I've been a bit unlucky. On average, it lasts about 4 years, but it's important to understand that, it can start at any age. And, that's why we need to be prepared for it. So I come from the corporate world. I worked in aviation for most of my career. I was really passionate about my job, and I was literally supporting airlines all around the world and, flying all around the world, which must have looked amazing to some people. If you cut me open, my job would have been the name of the company I work for. I absolutely put it above everything else, which I'm totally not proud of now. But, that's the kind of person I was. It was very career driven, was like, had a massive workload, was always juggling things. So as I kind of got further into perimenopause, it started to really impact me, particularly at work. So, things like going into meetings and experiencing hot flushes, it really made me feel quite self-conscious, bright red, sweating loads, you're like trying to fan yourself down. Then the brain fog would come. So, I think, Sandra, you touched on that a little bit earlier, how your mind can just go blank. Yeah, I couldn't even remember my team's names that had worked with me for years. I felt like my nan, kind of grasping for Jake, that's your name. Yeah, sorry, Jake. And I had, quite a young team. So they're probably looking at me thinking, what the hell is going on? You can't remember things. So, that was kind of all getting on top of me. And then I started to experience really bad anxiety with driving. I always loved driving. I found it a way of relaxing. And ironically, it was during the pandemic when the roads were completely empty. They were a dream to drive around. But here I was traveling to see one of my customers around the M25. And literally my heart would start racing. My hands would become sweaty. And I started to get lightheaded and blurry vision. Now, when you're on a smart motorway and there is no hard shoulder to pull over on, that can be quite a scary experience. So there I am, parked up the grass verge with, lorries flying past me, having to compose myself. And I put it off to a one-off event, but sadly, that wasn't the case. That it started to become a real regular thing. And believe it or not, anxiety is one of the biggest symptoms that people struggle with. I think 1 in 4 people experience it. So, that's obviously something we need to talk about and sure we share that is a symptom. On top of that, I started to get digestive issues and really bad kind of like acid reflux, which I never struggled with. So at this point, I'm thinking, right, there's something really wrong with me. So we went to the GP and started to have tests. But alongside that, I went to see a nutritionist, and she did all sorts of other tests, checking my vitamin levels, my thyroid, my adrenal glands, things like that. So anyway, she comes back and she goes, Sarah, look, she goes, your body is chronically inflamed and it's due to you not managing your menopause symptoms properly. The relief, to know that there was nothing wrong at the GP and that, okay, I've got a lot of work to do, but there's nothing tragic happening here. It can all be managed. And she said to me, you just need to manage your stress levels like that. If you're not managing this situation and your stress levels are increasing and everything's just exaggerating. So at this point, I'm kind of thinking, right, now's the time to put myself first, work can't come first anymore. So I left my corporate job and I focused on myself. And, I did all these good things that I researched a lot, but also what my nutritionist had told me. So then when I'm kind of feeling a little bit more balanced, remember I'm somebody that kind of a workaholic. So I'm like, right, what's going to happen next? So I thought, you know what? I've been through this for a reason. And, I don't want others to be in the position I've been in. When you have knowledge and you understand what's happening, it's amazing, like how quickly you can support yourself. It's a shame it kind of took me that many years. So that's why I set up my company called Don't Pause Menopause. And now I help individuals, but I also really try to drive the change into companies, because 1 in 10 people leave their job because of that. And 1 in 25 think about leaving their job because of them. So it's a massive, massive problem. And, I think raising that awareness, educating people is so important. I mean, I didn't even know there was a perimenopause. I didn't know there were 3 stages to menopause. Perimenopause, menopause, which technically only lasts a day, because it's 12 months without a period. And then after that, you're in postmenopause, where you are for the rest of your life. So, I wish I'd known all of this a decade plus ago, so I could have been prepared for it. And, it's something that is the opposite to puberty. So it's a natural transition. It won't last forever. And, we really, really need to be talking more and supporting this in every way. And I think it's important to touch on, surgical and medical menopause, because that can happen at any age. And, health conditions such as cancer or endometriosis, as you mentioned earlier, Sandy, can plunge people straight into menopause. And, that can be a lot worse than, transitioning through the decade like, or perhaps I have been, where I've been up and down, good days, bad days. So, we need to all be aware of things like that, because, it can happen to anyone, and it can happen at all sorts of ages. So like having your ovaries removed, radiotherapy in your pelvic area, some chemo drugs and endometriosis treatment. But we mustn't forget that also 1 in 100 women under the age of 40 have premature ovarian efficiency. We're all born with a certain amount of eggs, and, some are less than others. So it's worth bearing that in mind. I think you mentioned, Sandra, that people think of it as an old person's, an old person transitions through. No, I was 36, and, I hope people don't think that is old when you start to go through it. So it's also important to think about who's impacted. 51% of the population will go through it, and that includes women, some trans and non-binary people. But it impacts and affects all of us directly and indirectly, which is why we all need to be better educated. Our partners, we need to support our colleagues, our friends, our family that are going through it. So, we need to be having these conversations, and we all need to be learning more. Even if we're not going to go through it, there will be someone that you will be able to help at some point in your life. And I think you touched on this again, Sandy, like it is unique to everybody. No one's journey is the same. A friend of mine said to me recently, okay, right, so what are your symptoms? Because they'll be exactly the same as mine. I was like, no, they won't. There could be up to 80 symptoms, if not more. It's unique to everybody. And you could have your own cluster of symptoms that other people haven't heard of. There's some really random ones out there, like oral problems and burning tongue and vertigo. That was probably one of the first ones that I experienced. So, it's important to listen to your body and, and understand what is going on. And I think that awareness and getting that education, and I really do believe it should be taught in schools like puberty, so that, we're well prepared ages before we need it. And, it's important for people to recognize some of the more common symptoms, and, because they can help spot that perhaps in their friends or colleagues and say, have you thought perhaps you might be going through perimenopause? I mean, we have to remember that other conditions can present similar symptoms. So, we have to be mindful of that. But some of the more common symptoms, irregular periods can be a real common and one of the first things that people can notice. Periods can become heavier. They could be further apart, closer together. Hot flushes, that's probably one of the more common things people understand. But there's also night sweats that can really disrupt sleep, and you'll be hot one minute, freezing cold the next. Moods can literally be a roller coaster. And I think for me, that, 1 minute I can be happy and 1 minute I can be sad, literally like a flick of the switch. But that brain fog for me and the anxiety was probably some of the worst, but also the fatigue and the difficulty sleeping. And I think we all feel terrible when we haven't had a good night's sleep. So, it's important to understand someone might not be at their best, but there's also not one size fits all approach when it comes to menopause. So we know we need to share stories. We need to have conversations. And, we need to help people find that information to help support themselves through, kind of reputable charities and websites and places that can offer that good advice. 44% of people were not aware of perimenopause before they started to experience symptoms, and 46 didn't expect to go through it when they did. So those statistics really do say a lot about the knowledge that people have. So why is it important to support people? Well, at work, we want to retain our good quality people and, broaden our talent pools and create this diverse and inclusive work environment that people want to work in. We want to keep our talent, and we want to attract new talent. I certainly wouldn't go and work for a company that didn't support menopause now. And, women over the age of 50 are the fastest growing demographic in the workforce. So we need to be supporting that. And we need more women in leadership roles to make it more diverse. And, women pass over promotions or reduce their hours or retire early. Let's just stop that happening. And, it's also important to understand that tribunals are increasing. So we need to think about those legal implications. Menopause isn't currently protected under the law, but I very much believe it will, because the government are being pushed to protect it under the Equality Act. There was one employment tribunal whereby they heard that a factory worker was reprimanded for undoing her top button because she was having a hot flush. And she'd already told her company that she was going through it. So, so much more needs to be done. And it needs to be embedded into a company, not just, a policy and then left at that. There needs to be regular events. Menopause cafes are great. Webinars, podcasts, lunch and learns, train your managers, have well-being ambassadors that know about menopause. And, making reasonable adjustments, such as having desk plans, extra uniforms for people that need it, or for flexible working. We know that works since the pandemic, and access to sanitary products, and, look at workloads and have focus times where people can work without those kind of distractions that are going on around them all the time. So I think really, I could talk for ages about this, but, we'll kind of leave it there. But there is so much that can be done. And I just think we need to make sure we are all working and talking about this and supporting it together. And I think hopefully my generation will be the last generation that goes through this blind. And, I hope that the next generation have just own this and, they'll just have it, and it will just be a thing that's amazing in all companies and everywhere. So, yeah, look, thank you so much for letting me talk today. And at the end, I look forward to any questions that you have for me.